All right, you guys, my job as a life coach is to never make decisions for you. I just want to kind of put that disclaimer out there. Yes, full disclosure, I have left the church, but that doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you. Only you get to make that decision. And that's why I say give yourself permission to study it out. Exmormonology, episode number 2. Hey, you guys, I'm Amy Logan, your life coach and ex-Mormonology guide. All right, I hope that you were able to listen to the first episode. This is going to piggyback a little bit on that. So I shared a little bit of my story. Like I said, I'll be sprinkling in parts of my story. And this is super important to the point I want to get to today, which is permission. The point at which you give yourself permission to jump in and make decisions and do whatever you need to do to figure this puzzle out. All right, so I'm going to be giving you some specific things you can do that will help you get to that point. So I'm going to back up even more from where I was last week, but it was probably around 2003, 2004. It's a little foggy, but I had to go in to get a temple recommend, right? It was temple recommend interviews. It was still when they were every year. I think that was about the time. And I went in and I was having doubts. I was having feelings. I wasn't sure. So I shared with my bishop, I'm just having some doubts, but I have nothing to base it on. Really looking back, I'm like, well, it was my gut screaming out to me, my intuition telling me to do some research. But at that point, that's all I said. That's all I knew. And my bishop said, can you guess it? Anyone? Amy? Those doubts are from the devil. And I remember looking at him, probably like a deer caught in the headlights, right? I looked at him like, the devil? Like, what? Because here I am doing all the things. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do, being a good Mormon human. And so that really threw me. Now, remember, this was a long time ago. I had no idea that stories like that existed, like that was lingo bishops might possibly say or family members may say to you. So it really just took me aback. I was like, what are you talking about? So, of course, he signed my recommend because I did pass all the questions. And that was that. Went to the wedding. All was fine. During about that same time, let me tell you what my issue was. Okay, this was the issue. I think most of us have an issue or an experience that leads us to start doubting or questioning. For me, it was polygamy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I would remember reading D&C 132 and kind of going, this just doesn't feel right to me. I'm confused. What is this really about? And of course, I would talk to my husband and he would say, Amy, it really doesn't matter. That's going to be a choice you and I make in the next life. So don't worry about it. I'm like, okay. What do you say to that? Especially when you don't know anything yet. Then I had a girlfriend who had a lot of thoughts and feelings about polygamy too, and we would spend hours on the phone talking about it. And to tell you the truth, I can't really remember a lot of that. It was a blur. She knew a lot more about some of the history of polygamy, so we would talk about it. But it was all kind of in hypotheticals because I didn't know anything. And so it was just a lot of my thoughts and opinions just about polygamy, being kind of uneducated about it. So that was that. And then I had my best friend, hello Heidi, I love you dearly, who lived in my ward. And we were really good friends. And so I would just tell her, I'm like, I don't know, I just have doubts. That kind of thing. But of course, I was still doing all the things I was supposed to, going to church, being a visiting teacher, teaching my lessons at church, all the things. So now we're going to fast forward to 2006. Heidi calls me. And I remember that it was clear as day. I could picture it. It was a Saturday, springtime. We were cleaning the house. Kids were playing outside. It was just kind of one of those days. She's like, Amy, I could hear the panic in her voice. So I didn't know what was going to happen next. So I went into my office. I had a little business at the time. Some of you may know this. This is a side note. If you lived in Utah between the years of 2000 and 2012, I had a little ceramic hand and foot business called Tiny Touches. So some of you may know me from that. Hi there. That's a total side note, but that is a business that I held. So I've met some people who've come through and have gone, oh, you used to do my kids' hand and footprints. But so I went into my office. Heidi I hear panic in her voice. I sit down, ready to talk to her about whatever is going on. And she's basically saying, Amy, you're right. All your doubts were right. You were so right. You have to read this book. You need to go to this website. You need to check it out. I remember sitting down just writing frantically. She probably told me about 4 or 5 books to read. She told me about the website New Order Mormon. It was in that moment that I thought, Amy, you're 36 years old. It's time to give yourself permission to go figure this out for yourself. Like, I'm a grown up. Right? I have children of my own. I'm married. I have a business. It's just time. And so in that moment, I decided, okay, whatever comes next, I'm just going to go down this road, because I'm going to read to you guys some of these quotes. Maybe you have heard this before. I'm going to assume you have. If not, you'll probably relate to it. You've probably heard these, but here they go. President J. Reuben Clark. If we have the truth, it cannot be harmed by investigation. If we have not the truth, it ought to be harmed. Okay, that was one that I had read. Another one was from Gordon B. Hinckley. Each of us has to face the matter. Either the church is true or it is a fraud. There's no middle ground. It is the church and kingdom of God, or it is nothing. And I had heard and read those things throughout my life, and I just was so scared. Like I mentioned last time, that feeling that you're doing something wrong, which is such a crazy thing, right? Like, you're a member of a church and you've been taught by the leaders and your teachers to not read anti-Mormon literature. And there is a scare tactic in there, at least for me and my personality. That was scary to me. We were guided not to do that. Now, I don't know what I'm trying to remember what I thought that meant. I think I thought that meant people had taken the truth and then twisted it, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. Going back to that day, it was that day. And that was the beginning of the end for me, right? Like, that's what started just research. The reason I share that with you is because that moment, whatever that moment is for you, that you decide to give yourself permission, right? I had a bunch of thoughts before this. Now, what I want to tell you about, you're going to hear me talking about thoughts and feelings a lot. Because your thoughts create feelings in you, which create action or inaction in every single thing you do in life. Leading up to the point when Heidi called me, I had a bunch of thoughts that were scary wrapped around what would happen if if I look at anti-Mormon literature. That created a feeling of scariness for me. And of course, none of us like to be scared. Right? Like, I had loved my life up to this point. It's not like I had a terrible experience in the church. It was actually quite opposite. I had a beautiful experience in the church. I had lovely leaders who I still love and look up to today. I had a wonderful family. I still have a wonderful family. My husband's family, my family, and my friends, wonderful people. I have very few complaints about my life in Mormonhood. But what happens is you have all these thoughts that are keeping you stuck. They're keeping you from going forward to maybe what your gut, your intuition is screaming at you. For me, it was screaming at me for years. When Heidi called me, it created different thoughts for me, because this is someone who was my best friend. We had been through a lot together. Hearing the urgency in her voice and the franticness and just what she was going through, and she knowing what I had been going through. Now, during this time, she had moved away from Utah to Texas, so we weren't seeing each other and talking every day like we were when she lived near me. But I just decided in that moment that I'm an adult, I'm a grown-up, I'm smart, right? I've made lots of decisions in my life. If the church is true, it's fine. If the church is not true, I don't even know if I really entertained the idea that the church wouldn't be true. Up to that point, I just thought something's not right. It was from that point on that I just gave myself permission and thought, well, I'm going to go down this road. And I did. And I ended up leaving the church. If you are in this space, I want you to really evaluate the thoughts and feelings you have going on, especially if you're in that scared space, right? Because you don't know what's on the other side. You don't know what's going to happen or the conclusion you will come to. Now, if you have found me and my podcast, then you may have already given yourself permission, and that's fantastic. But if you haven't, or you're still scared and you're not sure and you haven't really done a full dive into the church, maybe you don't feel like you need to research history. That's fine. Not everybody does. But permission to start thinking for yourself. Not that I say that hesitantly, but when I was a member of the church, I would say I thought for myself. But now that I'm on this side, what I say is I was thinking for myself with the information that I had sitting in front of me. Does that make sense? Now I thought, okay, I'm going to go gather more information. Because when you are 8 years old and you're getting baptized, we hear like, oh, we're so proud of Jenny. She decided to become a member of the church. Well, when you're 8, think about how many decisions you make in life, right? Like you're pretty much going with whatever your family decides to do about anything. And if you get a pretty new white dress and you're going to have some pretty photos taken of you and you're going to have a party or, a celebration, people are going to come see you get baptized, and it's a family tradition, right? So if you come from a family like mine where that goes on and it's a big deal and that kind of thing, do you really make that decision? I don't know too many 8-year-olds who would buck the system. Now, I'm sure that's happened, but I'm just going to say usually at 8, you're not walking around thinking about that in that way. You don't really know to think that way. At 36, I thought, okay, I'm going to own this. Whatever happens is going to happen. And that's what happened. So what I want you to think about is, I gave you a homework assignment last week. I hope you've done a brain dump and you've written a lot of your thoughts down. You're paying attention to your thoughts. So what do you need to think to create a feeling that will produce the action of the next step you need to take? All right. So for me, it was, I'm 36. I'm an adult. That felt empowering to me. To me, that felt not as scary as don't read anti-Mormon literature. That is someone else's thought that gets put on repeat at at church and different meetings and stuff. Don't read anti-Mormon literature. Okay. That's someone else's thought that I just adopted as my own. That was a fact. This is what I mean about our thoughts are not always facts. Okay. That was just someone else's thought. That kind of came down the chain of command in Mormonism. And I adopted that as true, meaning I shouldn't do that thing. So when I thought I'm not supposed to read anti-Mormon literature, that made me feel scared if I did do that thing. So what was my action? My action was I didn't do anything. I spun in doubt for a really long time. So when Heidi called me that day, it created a different line of thinking that I hadn't really given myself permission to think. And that line of thinking was, I'm an adult. I'm going to figure this out, come what may. Those thoughts created feelings of empowerment or at least more confidence than don't read anti-Mormon literature and what that made me feel. Everything you do in life is created by a thought that leads to a feeling, which leads to an action. And I will be repeating this a lot because I sit with my clients and we go over this all the time in our sessions. I even have a life coach that I go to that helps me process my own thinking and my own feelings when I can't see it, because we all have blind spots sometimes and we don't even know to question some things. And so sometimes you need to question your own thoughts. So when you are debating on whether giving yourself permission, if you've even framed it that way, I love that because you giving yourself permission is empowering. No matter where you land, you will go down that road of research or contemplation differently than if you're scared, right? Now, that doesn't mean there's not fear involved, okay? I was scared, but there's a difference of being scared and doing it anyway. I posted a meme today on my social media talking about how you are so brave. And I probably spoke about this last week, but people would tell me how brave I was, when I started posting my YouTube video or sharing with people that I've left. And I'd just be like, that's not what I feel. I'm scared as hell right now. It doesn't feel brave to me. That's why you're amazing, because you are willing to go down this path. As you're making the decision, maybe you haven't given yourself permission yet. I want you to think thoughts that give you more of a self-confident feeling. That doesn't mean you might be 100% self-confident, but it's more than being scared to where you don't take any action. Do you see the difference there? You want to create thoughts that are going to move you in the direction versus staying still. Because staying stuck and in limbo like I did, I would say I was probably in limbo, just spinning in my own doubt for probably 4 years before I gave myself permission. So I understand that it's not always a quick process. Now, once I started reading and doing my own homework and study, my belief in the church kind of crumbled pretty quickly, but I was so scared leading up to that. I want you to think of that and process that as you are trying to make a decision about what to do. Now, you can apply the same thing, the same principle to whether you should stay or go, and we'll talk about that later. But right now, I want you to know that just because something feels scary or confusing, it doesn't mean you should stop there. All right, reframe it. Be curious about it, like I mentioned last week. Thoughts and words that other people tell you are their thoughts. So when my bishop said that I was being tempted by the devil or that doubts were from the devil, that was his thought. All right. And then I just kind of took it as like, okay, maybe I am. Right. Which puts I feel a little more scared. All right. I feel like that is a scare tactic used to control people. All right. You're a grown up. I would say the people listening to my voice are most likely adults. You get to make this decision for yourself, no matter what. All right. When someone else's thought is placed in your head as truth, that's where it gets a little confusing. I want you to be aware of that. And I want you to start looking at what you're wanting and then creating thoughts and feelings that help that happen versus just feeling scared and stuck. Right? Maybe empowered. Like my goal for all of my clients is to feel empowered, to find their voice, and to gain self-confidence, especially around this issue. Because being someone who stayed stuck for about 4 years, limbo is a tough place to be. The process of leaving the church, or at least going through the faith crisis, it is a process, and it's you're peeling back. So what I want you to do as you are building up to give yourself permission, I want you to really think about the thoughts you want to think on purpose and practice them. If you're too scared to kind of open a book or go searching online, just start practicing, thoughts like, I'm able to read and investigate what I want, or it would be wise of me to study the history of my church. These are things I should know. All right. See how that feels different than doubting is from the devil? Especially if you're in the believing mode of a believer and you do believe that there is a power of Satan who can have its grasps and hold on you, that's going to feel very restrictive. All right. You're a grown up. You get to make decisions for your life. And I think this is the beginning of feeling empowered in your life. Even though it hurts when you go through this process, it's the beginning to feeling better. It's kind of like it's going to get worse before it gets better. This is how it begins. And giving yourself permission is the best gift you can ever give yourself. So work on those thoughts. What thoughts are going to help you feel better about taking the next step wherever you are? All right. All right, you guys, that is it for today. It is all about giving yourself permission and creating thoughts and feelings that help you take the next step. Please make sure you go sign up for my 10 post-Mormon life hacks on my website, amyloganlife.com, where you will be added to my list and receive emails every Friday, and sometimes sprinkled through the week as well. But every Friday is my Letter Friday, where I write love notes to you and special life coaching for those people who are on my list. So make sure you go do that. I will see you next week on Exmormonology.